It's 1 p.m. in New York, 8 p.m. in the Middle East. Live from Jaffa, this is I24 News. I'm Michal Divon with the lineup. Tonight, we begin with a gathering political storm in Israel. Former Prime Minister Ehud Barak has slammed Prime Minister Netanyahu of causing serious harm to the state's security, branding him a, quote, weak and paranoid leader. His remarks, picked up across Israeli media, also prompted member of Knesset for the Zionist Union, Omer Bar-Lev, to demand that the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee hold an urgent meeting. So, is there a concrete base to Ehud Barak's hinted claims, or are his statements simply a political tactic used to get him back to the center stage? Let's take a look at this next report by diplomatic correspondent Eli Hochenberg and then break it down in the studio.
A political showdown and possible strategic threat to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Former Israeli leader Ehud Barak went on a personal offensive against current premier.
A hunted man full of anxiety and fear who is blowing verbal smoke screens, but misses time and again opportunities to strengthen Israel's security out of political zigzagging and endless hesitations.
The attack continued with Barak describing Netanyahu as weak and paranoid and then shifted to direct accusations.
When an agreement will soon be signed over American aid to Israel for the coming decade, the scale of damage and Netanyahu's reckless gambling in managing relations with the White House will be revealed. Instead of the $4.5 billion that was expected and feasible a year ago, immediately after the signing of the nuclear deal in Vienna, Israel will get $3.8 billion, and that will be subject to the demand that we not request additions from Congress.
Allegations against Netanyahu then turned vague, with Barak alluding to a mysterious incident in which Netanyahu allegedly severely damaged Israel's security.
One incident involved poor judgment regarding security interests and priorities, as well as reckless conduct. This led to a very disturbing exposure of Israel in one of its major security challenges.
It is far from the first time that Barak, who at one time served under Netanyahu as defense minister, has gone after the prime minister publicly. But this time around, he may have to defend his statements on the record. Zionist Union lawmaker Omer Bar-Lev has called for an emergency session of the parliament's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee so that Barak can testify. While people from Barak's inner circle told Israeli media he would be willing to do so, the chairman of the parliament's committee, Avi Dichter of the Likud party, stated he would consider holding a meeting only if Barak's claims are first substantiated. Dichter also hit back at Barak, suggesting he's either obsessed with power or depressed. In any case, it seems that Barak may soon have to stand behind his words.
And Omer Bar-Lev, member of Knesset with the opposition Zionist Union Party, joins us now on the line. We appreciate you being on the program tonight. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
So you called upon the head of the Defense Committee to summon Barak. Why did you do this?
I think it's quite clear once our ex-prime minister and ex-security minister says that he's very concerned regarding certain strategic issues that our current prime minister Netanyahu is leading us. And he says that it's classified. I think it's only obvious that he will be invited to one of our subcommittees dealing with the intelligence and let us know what he knows, what he thinks about, and we will be able to analyze what he's saying and to see whether or not we or some of us agree, we have any questions, we have any remarks, and maybe if there is something about what he's saying, we can deal with that.
Do you think Netanyahu is a threat to Israel from a security standpoint?
I have quite a lot of criticism regarding Netanyahu and regarding Netanyahu's security and foreign policy, but it's nothing. It's not connected to what Barak gave his clues about it, because I don't know what is behind Barak's remarks. So I cannot say whether it's related to things I know or things I think about, or it's something different. The only way to understand that is to to ask Barak to come to the subcommittee and present his thoughts and his ideas and his knowledge.
Omer Bar-Lev, member of the Israeli parliament from the Zionist Union Party, thank you very much for weighing in this evening and bringing the discussion back to the studio. Our diplomatic correspondent Eli Hochenberg joins us now. I'd love your take on the commotion that Barak's statements have made here in Israel.
Yes, well, I think that it is very important to distinguish between the political bickering and the concrete allegations. And it seems that Barak is not really making such a distinction. On the one hand, we have an extremely personal attack here. Barak is lashing out at Netanyahu's personality, his character, his manner. And on the other hand, we might really hear some alarming testimonies on misconduct that is leading to severe damage to Israel's security. Now, people close to Barak says today that he's not talking about a sole incident, but an ongoing saga, again, of misconduct, poor conduct on behalf of Netanyahu. On Netanyahu's side, they claim they have no idea what Barak is talking about, and they further say that Barak should be the last one to speak when we're talking about U.S. military aid. The Likud claims that we are still waiting for $1 billion of American aid to arrive. Barak promised many years ago when he was a defense minister. So I think that both sides in this case are not really making the distinction between the political aspect of the fight and the concrete allegations, something Omer Bar-Lev is trying to do and summon Barak to testify within the framing of a parliament committee. And then it will not be the public stage that will be at the center, but again, the allegations themselves and the potential harm to Israel's security.
And rule out whatever political maneuvering might be at hand. Eli Hochenberg, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And countries without diplomatic relations are rarely seen publicly in joint military exercise. But when an invitation is extended from the U.S. Air Force, well, few will say no. A U.S. official confirmed to I24news defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari that Israel, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates began a joint military exercise on Monday in the Nevada desert. Here's the report.
The U.S. Air Force has confirmed to I24news that the air forces of Pakistan, the UAE, and Israel are all taking part in the same exercise being conducted at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, known as Red Flag 16-4. The story was originally reported by Israeli daily Haaretz, but this is the first official public confirmation that Pakistan and the UAE are taking part in the current drill, along with Israel, which began on August 15th and will end on August 26th. Previous evidence included pictures taken by private aviation enthusiasts. Israel had refused to comment on the participation of other countries, while Pakistan and the UAE have also refrained from statements on the matter. The U.S. and Spanish air forces are also taking part. Israel has no official ties with Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state with a strong Muslim identity. There are very discreet ties between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, which do not constitute full diplomatic relations. As part of the Red Flag exercise, combat is simulated, with U.S. planes making up the aggressor force and the other participating nations making up the defending force, meaning Israel, Pakistan, and the UAE are playing on the same team, so to speak. A U.S. Air Force officer described the exercise as providing, quote, a forum for valuable cross-talk between services, as well as coalition partners. Israel, Pakistan, and the UAE have all taken part in the Red Flag drill in previous years, but this is the first occasion that all three have participated together.
And with me in studio is senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari. Thanks for joining us. First of all, a reaction from the IDF.
Right. The IDF has responded to this confirmation coming from the U.S. again. The IDF trains regularly in order to maintain operational competency and to prepare for any potential challenge. The Israeli Air Force was invited to participate in the exercise Red Flag and has accepted favorably. However, in any exercise in which the IDF takes part, information security precautions will be taken. So this would suggest that perhaps there isn't too much direct communication between the actual pilots, let's say. Even in Israel, Israeli pilots are not allowed to expose themselves to the media in terms of their identities. So this would be fairly complicated in this kind of exercise where we're actually speaking of them actually being on the same team in a simulation, of course. Again, this was initially reported by Haaretz.
And what do we know about the drill itself?
Right. What's new here is the confirmation that we've received from the U.S. Air Force that we're talking about Pakistan, the UAE, Israel, as well as Spain and the U.S. itself. This was previously sort of the previous reports were based on like blogs and reports photos taken by private aviation enthusiasts, but the removal of ambiguity is very significant here. The ambiguity itself was very convenient, I'd say, for Israel, for Pakistan, for the UAE, but they're no longer able to hide behind that once the U.S. has confirmed. Actually, there was a crash there on the perimeter of the base, you could say. This morning, Air Force officials confirmed an A-4 Skyhawk was crashed by a public contractor who was supporting 57th Wing operations, basically meaning a civilian was flying a former military aircraft and crashed. The 57th Wing is basically the aggressor force in this exercise, made up of U.S. planes. This aircraft was in a supporting role. The pilot apparently managed to eject with minor injuries.
Okay, so the drill is confirmed, but of course very sensitive, and we won't be getting a lot of information. Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very much. We're going to go live to Islamabad now, where Kaswar Klasra joins us. Good evening to you. An unlikely alliance. What brings together these countries? Why now? Are you with us?
Hello?
Hello, Kaswar Klasra, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening to you. Good evening to you. We were just discussing here in studio the drill that is taking place with Israel, Pakistan, the UAE, with the United States, of course. What is your take on this four-way alliance?
Well, definitely, you would appreciate to know that Israel and Pakistan don't have diplomatic relation at all. So, but there are some voices here in Pakistan which are really happy for what the Pakistan. So the Israeli soldier will be taking part in United States. Some here in Pakistan, for small people, for small portion of Pakistani people, they are really appreciating. But keeping in view the relationship between Israel and Pakistan, we don't have a diplomatic relationship at all. So this is what which is irking the government at the moment as well. But regarding your question about my take, definitely it could be a good move, but the official in Pakistan is not talking about it publicly. But what I believe this could be a very good move, and we can go ahead from this point to forward as well. Because I personally believe the two countries, the Israelis and the Pakistans, must have established a good relationship, and they should have the diplomatic relationship as well. So I think what's going on there in the United States, it could be ice-breaking, and the soldiers of two countries who don't have diplomatic relationship can establish to some extent some, the relationship as well. And I must appreciate the U.S. government to have provided the Pakistani side and the Israeli side to join hand at the moment as well.
Kaswar Klasra, thank you very much for joining us and weighing in. And as you mentioned, a breaking of the ice, perhaps. Now we stay in Israel. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman unveils a new policy towards Palestinians based on the carrot and stick model. Harsher punishment for families and villages where terrorists originate, and economic benefits for West Bank areas that are clean of terror-related activity. This next report with the details. And we don't have this report, but we do have Shai Ben-Ari in studio with us, staying here. Once again, thanks for staying with us. Now, how do you see this policy? Is this the extension of a Lieberman-led policy to crack down and have harsher actions towards the Palestinians?
That is part of it. Let's basically explain the basic principles of what he sees as the proper approach towards the Palestinians. It has three real pillars. First of all, you have an overall carrot and stick approach to the Palestinian issue, which is really based both on geography and behavior, basically along the principle of approving plans and benefits for zones that do not generate large amounts of terrorism, approving plans for hospitals, infrastructure, roads, that kind of thing. When it comes to areas, and there are many, of course, that do generate a lot of violence in the current context, you would increase negative punitive measures. For example, blockades, more home demolitions, revoking work permits. That would be the main principle that he wants to implement here. He also speaks of simply bypassing the current Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, who he sees as an almost irrelevant figure and a disruptive one. He says that the third pillar is establishing alternative channels of communication through academics, through certain key figures in Palestinian society who he believes are the proper address.
And this, of course, raises the issue of human rights. I want to bring into the conversation Isa Amro, human rights defender in Hebron. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'd love your reaction to Lieberman's latest suggested policy.
I think it's not a new policy. Sharon used the same policy, and the occupation since 1967 are using the same policy toward the Palestinians. We consider this kind of policies as part of the collective punishment against Palestinian people, and it's against the international law. On the other hand, is he thinking to implement the same policy on the Israeli violent settlers who are attacking the Palestinians and who are opposing even the Israeli government? It's a political act from Lieberman. He's trying to impose his ideology on all the Israelis and the Palestinians, and it's not about violence or non-violence. It's about who is with the occupation and who is against the occupation, and he wants all the Palestinians to become a collaborator. This kind of policies will not succeed, and the Palestinians will resist it, and I think Lieberman will be accountable about this kind of policies. He's trying to frame it, but it's an old policy.
Now, Isa, you mentioned collective punishment. One can't ignore the role of the environment. Israel does face terror attacks on a regular basis on civilians and on soldiers. What should Israel be doing if not taking these security measures?
The only solution for what is happening in Palestine is to have peace with the Palestinians, is to give the Palestinians their rights and to end the occupation. So if you want to solve what is happening all over Palestine and Israel, the best solution is to have a solution from the roots, which is the occupation. The main issue of everything, the main cause of everything is the occupation. So that is the solution. He should think about to go to France and have a peace process and end the occupation and give the Palestinians their self-determination and their full rights. That is the only solution.
And Isa, while there are no diplomatic negotiations or efforts taking place, and there are these security considerations, Israel, of course, wants to prevent and discourage terrorist activity. So, first of all, do you think it works? Do these things deter Palestinian terror activity?
No, I don't think that we should, as Palestinians, use any kind of violence. We should use non-violence, but even the non-violence activists and the human rights defenders are a target from the Israeli security forces. They target everyone. They target anyone. They don't distinguish between the people who are advocating for non-violence and the one who are really believe in violence. In one hand, we are talking about that why they build more and more settlements. If they want to talk about two-state solution, if they want to talk about peace, if it's not secure in West Bank, why more and more settlers are being sent to West Bank, and they are announcing more settlements, plans, more settlements, apartments, industrial zones, and even they are talking about these days, clinics, and as it's part of their plans for the settlers to make them satisfied. I think the main responsible about the failure of the peace process is Lieberman and Netanyahu, because they don't want any kind of sacrifice for the Palestinians. They want only security measures. They want only to control more and more the Palestinians.
Well, Isa Amro, thank you very much for joining us. Doesn't exactly answer my question, but we will leave it at that. Thank you very much for this, and I'll also thank Shai Ben-Ari for being here with us today as we stay in the region. Authorities in Turkey are blaming Kurdish rebels for 3 separate bombings that killed 9 people and wounded hundreds in less than 24 hours. The first 2 bombings were apparently targeting police, killing 6 and injuring over 200. And the third killed 3 soldiers.
2 car bombs targeted police stations in Turkey, killing at least 10 people and wounding more than 200 others. An uptick in violence blamed on the Kurdistan Workers' Party.
Terör örgütü yaşam hakkı bulamayacak.
There is nothing to interpret. The PKK terror group has lost its chain of command. Its elements inside Turkey are carrying out suicide attacks randomly, wherever they get the opportunity.
The bombings come after two similar attacks earlier in the week, one in the eastern province of Van, the other in the Syrian border city of Diyarbakir, which together killed 11 people. And while Turkey is fighting a deadly insurgency within its borders, the country appears to be drifting apart from its Western allies. One of them is Germany, where a leaked document produced by the Interior Ministry portrayed Turkey as a platform for Islamist groups.
The numerous statements of solidarity and action of support for the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and groups of the armed Islamist opposition in Syria by the ruling party AKP and President Erdogan underline their ideological affinity to the Muslim Brothers. Since 2011, Turkey has developed into the central platform of action for Islamist groups in the Middle East region.
Turkey is demanding explanations, as Berlin is trying to downplay the document, with an official saying it was written by the deputy interior minister without the knowledge of the interior minister or foreign minister. The document and other diplomatic incidents over the past month have brought bilateral ties with the West to a boiling point. This, despite Turkey being a key partner in the fight against Islamic State, something Germany has repeatedly stressed. Together with its geopolitical position, Ankara is an important player, thus making for tense times in various Western capitals.
And Hassan Abdullah, senior news editor for TRT World in Ankara, is with us now via Skype. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
So what do we know about the recent string of bombings? It's been a very brutal 24 hours in Turkey.
That's right. We're talking about at least 14 people dead and around 300 injured in 4 different areas of the country. Now, the government officials are saying that these attacks have been carried out by the PKK, which Turkey recognizes as a terrorist organization. And a number of people are still in a critical condition. And we understand that, of course, we've had the president earlier say that there is collaboration between different terrorist organizations. He named the PKK, he named the Islamic State, and he also named the Gülenist network. So investigations are continuing at the moment, and also we're going to have a security meeting later in the evening here in Ankara, in which some of the counterterrorism policies will also be reviewed.
Who are the bombs targeting?
Well, in 2 of the cases, the target were policemen. In one of the attacks in which an IED had been planted, the Turkish military was the target. And but of course, when we look at the people who were injured, the majority of them were actually ordinary civilians, ordinary citizens. For example, one of the bombs exploded close to this wedding hall, and there is this video available of that as well. So it seems at the moment that while some of the more specific targets are the security agencies and those people affiliated to the state, there is probably this tendency to resort to, asymmetrical warfare, demoralize the public, and try and discredit the government.
Now, Hassan, this is all taking place in the context of the post-coup crackdown. What can you tell us from the latest arrests?
Well, one of the interesting things that officials tell us here in Ankara is that when a number of suspects were being interrogated, a number of them disclosed that there had been collaboration between them, i.e. what the government calls the Fethullah terrorist organization, and also some members of the Islamic State and PKK. Government officials are basically saying that the collaboration has been when it comes to logistics and also basically providing sort of safe passages to others. So this is something very interesting at the moment, which is being investigated by the security agencies here in Turkey. They're saying that it seems that some of the people who were, of course, who the government is calling fifth columnists, the government is saying that they had been trying to use sort of state cover to engage in their subversive activities and activities that the state would not endorse.
It seems the crackdown is nowhere near end. Hassan Abdullah, senior editor for TRT, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
We're moving now to the United States. Security is tight in uptown Charlotte ahead of Donald Trump's return tomorrow. Today, the GOP candidate had his first classified intelligence briefing. And Eyewitness News anchor Liz Foster just learned national security will be his focus at Thursday's rally. ABC News has more.
Just hours before his visit to Charlotte, Donald Trump received his first classified intelligence briefing today. Security expert Chris Swecker went through at least 2 classified briefings a day when he was the assistant director of the FBI. I asked him what Trump and his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton will hear.
They'll get a fairly generic briefing. They're not going to get any information about the sources, the methods, that from which the information came from, so that they can't compromise that in any way.
Tomorrow in Charlotte, the Republican nominee for president plans to talk about his national security plan. One idea he just laid out:
we will have to temporarily suspend immigration from some of the most dangerous and volatile regions of the world that have a history of exporting terrorism.
It just absolutely bewilders me when I hear Donald Trump try to talk about national security.
Swecker predicts the candidate's plans for national security will evolve leading up to the election. But one thing that won't change: how important of a role national security will play in this election.
The world is a pretty dangerous place right now, and it's only going to get worse.
And here's some more of the news today and today's headlines that we will miss.
Ukraine might introduce martial law and mobilize more troops if the year-long fight with pro-Russian rebels in the east escalates. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said he is not ruling out the option, as tensions with Russia over Crimea are rising again, endangering the already fragile ceasefire. In South Sudan, opposition leader Riek Machar fled the country, weeks after he led the capital of Juba in response to intense fighting between forces loyal to him and President Salva Kiir. Machar's spokesman declined to give information on his whereabouts, but did say he's in a safe country within the region. Last month, a peace deal signed between the warring factions fell apart. An emergency landing at Ataturk Airport in Istanbul after the engine of a Qatar Airways plane caught fire. The plane, an Airbus 330, landed safely and there were no casualties among crew and passengers. A different kind of aerial drama. A woman gave birth mid-flight, earning her lucky baby a lifetime of free flights. During a flight from Dubai to the Philippines, Missy Umdamal, whose due date was in October, started having contractions. 2 nurses on board helped her deliver the baby girl. The UK announced it would impose taxes on companies selling soft drinks containing high amounts of sugar and invest those taxes in health programs for children. The move is part of an overall plan to reduce obesity amongst youngsters, as nearly 1/3 of children aged 2 to 15 are overweight or obese. Companies raised uproar over the plan. Good news for Harry Potter fans, as 3 new e-books on the history of the magical school of Hogwarts are set to be released early September. Author J.K. Rowling announced a new series named Potter's More Presents and said it would dig deeper into the darker side of the wizardry universe. It comes only 2 weeks after her latest book, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, hit the shelves. Originally a screenplay, the performance is being staged in London.
And we're going to take a 1-minute break. 1 minute and we're back. Don't go anywhere. Do you think Netanyahu is a threat to Israel from a security standpoint?
I have quite a lot of criticism regarding Netanyahu and regarding Netanyahu's security and foreign policy, but it's nothing. It's not connected to what Barak gave his clues about it. Because I don't know what is behind Barak's remarks. So I cannot say whether it's, related to things I know or things I think about, or it's something different. The only way to understand that is to, to ask Barak to come to the subcommittee and present his thoughts and his ideas. And
Israel in one of its major security challenges.
It is far from the first time that Barak, who at one time served under Netanyahu's defense minister, has gone after the prime minister publicly. But this time around, he may have to defend his statements on the record. Zionist Union lawmaker Omer Bar-Lev has called for an emergency session of the parliament's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee so that Barak can testify. While people from Barak's inner circle told Israeli media he would be willing to do so, the chairman of the parliament's committee, Avi Dichter of the Likud party, stated he would consider holding a meeting only if Barak's claims are first substantiated. Dichter also hit back at Barak, suggesting he's either obsessed with power or depressed. In any case, it seems that Barak may soon have to stand behind his words.
And Omer Bar-Lev, member of Knesset with the opposition Zionist Union Party, joins us now on the line. We appreciate you being on the program tonight. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
So you called upon the head of the Defense Committee to summon Barak. Why did you do this?
A hunted man full of anxiety and fear who is blowing verbal smoke screens, but misses time and again opportunities to strengthen Israel's security out of political zigzagging and endless hesitations.
The attack continued with Barak describing Netanyahu as weak and paranoid and then shifted to direct accusations.
When an agreement will soon be signed over American aid to Israel for the coming decade, the scale of damage and Netanyahu's reckless gambling in managing relations with the White House will be revealed. Instead of the $4.5 billion that was expected and feasible a year ago, immediately after the signing of the nuclear deal in Vienna, Israel will get $3.8 billion, and that will be subject to the demand that we not request additions from Congress.
Allegations against Netanyahu then turned vague, with Barak alluding to a mysterious incident in which Netanyahu allegedly severely damaged Israel's security.
One incident involved poor judgment regarding security interests and priorities, as well as reckless conduct. This led to a very disturbing exposure of Israel.
It's 1 p.m. in New York, 8 p.m. in the Middle East. Live from Jaffa, this is I24 News. I'm Michal with the lineup. Tonight, we begin with a gathering political storm in Israel. Former Prime Minister Ehud Barak has slammed Prime Minister Netanyahu of causing serious harm to the state's security, branding him a, quote, weak and paranoid leader. His remarks, picked up across Israeli media, also prompted member of Knesset for the Zionist Union, Omer Bar-Lev, to demand that the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee hold an urgent meeting. So, is there a concrete base to Ehud Barak's hinted claims, or are his statements simply a political tactic used to get him back to the center stage? Let's take a look at this next report by diplomatic correspondent Eli Hochenberg and then break it down in the studio.
A political showdown and possible strategic threat to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Former Israeli leader Ehud Barak went on a personal offensive against current premier.
I think it's quite clear once our ex-prime minister and ex-security minister says that he's very concerned regarding certain strategic issues that our current Prime Minister Netanyahu is leading us. And he says that it's classified. I think it's only obvious that he will be invited to one of our subcommittees dealing with the intelligence and let us know what he knows, what he thinks about, and we will be able to analyze what he's saying and to see whether or not we or some of us agree, we have any questions, we have any remarks, and maybe if there is something about what he's saying, we can deal with that.